The arrest of Joaquín El Chapo Guzman on February 22, 2014, was heralded as one of the most significant blows to drug trafficking in decades by both Mexican and U.S. officials. However, even after years, the primary business of Guzman's Sinaloa Cartel seems to have been little harmed. But who actually is leading the Sinaloa Cartel now? Bear with us until the very end, as in this video, we're discovering the life after El Chapo. History. Guzman has been the subject of a worldwide manhunt since he escaped from a Mexican jail serving a 20-year term in 2001. His evasion was glorified in narco corridos, Mexican songs extolling the drug trade. Still in Chicago, where his cartel supplied the bulk of the drugs sold in the city, he was dubbed public enemy number 1. Guzman dropped out of school in the 3rd grade after being born into poverty in the western Mexican state of Sinaloa in the 1950s. As a young man, he got engaged in the drug trade, and by the late 1980s, he had started to accumulate his own authority as a trafficker. Rival drug traffickers attempted to assassinate Guzman at a Mexican airport in 1993. Guzman was captured in Guatemala shortly after and deported to Mexico, where he was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison for drug trafficking, bribery, and conspiracy. Guzman paid off the personnel and continued to manage his illicit operation from behind bars while imprisoned in the Mexican state of Jalisco. Then, in January 2001, he escaped from jail. According to some stories, Guzman was carried out in a laundry cart, while others believe jail personnel just let him walk out. Guzman would not be detained for an extended period. Finally, on July 11, 2015, he made his way out of the prison shower, which was the only spot where the cameras couldn't see him, to a construction site approximately a mile away, through a tunnel that went to a construction site. El Chapo descended to the tunnel roughly 30 feet below ground level using a telescoping ladder. Afterward, he dashed through the tunnel, which was less than 6 feet tall and just 30 inches wide, and vanished within 25 minutes of being last seen entering the restroom by surveillance cameras. Guzman was apprehended in early 2016 after a 6-month search resulted in his arrest. After a protracted legal fight, he was finally extradited to the United States, where he will face a 17-count indictment. El Chapo was found guilty of all accusations against him on February 12, 2019. On July 17, 2019, a federal court in New York City sentenced him to life in prison for his crimes against the United States. Effect of Guzman's arrest. But Guzman's capture hasn't weakened the Sinaloa Cartel, which continues to send millions of dollars of drugs to the United States each month. And in 2019, they artfully outmuscled Mexican federal forces to take control of one of the country's largest cities. The other two were Juan Jose Esparragoza, also known as Al Azul, who was supposed to have died in the same year, and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, who is currently on the run from authorities. Thus, many assumed that El Chapo's arrest would result in Zambada's seamless succession to power. But the 73-year-old narco has come under increasing pressure in several cases, and close collaborators, including one of his sons, arrest, and he has reportedly come dangerously close to being apprehended on several occasions. Moreover, the state capital of Culiacan, previously El Mayo's indisputable home turf, seems to have been rendered helpless in the face of a recent intrusion into the city by a former protege of El Chapo named Damaso Lopez, who is said to have made inroads into the city's street-level drug peddling. The Sinaloa Cartel refers to itself as a group of families with the bulk of its members hailing from the Golden Triangle, a mountainous region where Sinaloa, Chihuahua, and Durango meet, according to the organization. Some in Culiacan thought that El Chapo's son, Ivan Archibaldo Guzman, would ultimately take over as leader of the organization, while others felt that he was too inexperienced to be in charge of the whole operation. The arrest of Ovidio Guzman. At the time of the arrest of Guzman's 28-year-old son, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, by 30 Mexican troops and members of the National Guard, hundreds of cartel warriors converged on the northern city of Culiacan in response to that detention. Since his father's arrest, Ovidio Guzman Lopez has taken on a more prominent position in the organization's operations. Fighters surrounded the house where the younger Guzman was being lodged, and they captured and held hostage 8 members of the Mexican security services. Then these terrorists launched simultaneous assaults on various parts of the metropolis, including the state prosecutor's offices and roads leading into the city, which were blocked by burning vehicles. After 4 hours of wrangling, Mexican authorities eventually gave up. The release of Guzman and the withdrawal of Mexican security forces from Culiacan resulted from a decision reached to maintain the well-being of Culiacan. The show of power brought attention to the continued domination of drug traffickers in the region, and the reality that Sinaloa cartels and other organized crime syndicates are more intricate than is often supposed by law enforcement officials. El Chapo has long been regarded as Mexico's godfather and an all-powerful fugitive, who has been at the top of the Drug Enforcement Administration's most wanted list for many years. As a result of his profitable drug smuggling enterprise and 2 successful prison escapes from Mexican jails, Guzman amassed billions of dollars. He was also clearly in a position of considerable authority. Numerous researchers think that Guzman was never the only head of the Sinaloa Cartel, but instead was the leader of a large unit inside the organization. Others in Sinaloa are also powerful, each with their own army of armed guards and their own suppliers and customers in the United States. According to Miguel Angel Vega, an investigative journalist in Culiacan who's been investigating drug traffickers and organized crime for more than 15 years. According to him, there are additional Sinaloa bosses, each with his or her own army of armed guards, as well as their or their own suppliers and customers in the United States. There are a total of 20 El Chapos in this place. Fight for the title. The Los Chapitos have been in conflict with El Mayo and their uncle, Aureliano Guzman Loera, alias El Guano, over leadership of the group's activities in the absence of their father since his final 2016 arrest and subsequent extradition. Given that their father formed the organization, the sons seem to have thought they were entitled to inherit what their father had accomplished. Consequently, intense confrontations between the two groups have raged on for years and are still ongoing. Last but not least, Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, aka El Chino Antrax, a former leader of the Sinaloa Cartel's Los Antrax death squad and an associate of El Mayo, was discovered dead in San Diego in May 2020 after evading federal probation monitoring. Los Chapitos are suspected of being responsible for the murder. Growing up in Culiacan with the Zambada family and alongside El Mayo's boys, El Chino Antrax was an intimate associate of El Mayo. Because of this lengthy relationship, it seems doubtful that the aged Chapo would have had much to gain by assassinating a long-term comrade when he could have needed him, given the high level of internal tensions in the organization. The death toll after a multi-hour gunfight purportedly between the two parties outside of Culiacan is expected to rise to 16. Whether this will enable the two parties to see eye to eye or put them on a single track to agree on how the Sinaloa Cartel should function is not evident. For the time being, the group's internal differences have not prevented it from maintaining its position as one of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations. In particular, the gang has adapted to evolving drug markets and has become more active in the synthetic drug trade alongside the CJNG, particularly in the trafficking of the very potent synthetic opioid fentanyl, which is particularly dangerous. In reality, Los Chapitos has extended its operations to include the exploitation of drug rehabilitation institutions to recruit new traffickers, which has resulted in an increase in violence between them and El Mayo. Most of Los Chapitas' activities occur in their home in Sinaloa State, the group's fiefdom in northwest Mexico along the country's Pacific coast, particularly in the capital city of Culiacan, where they were born and raised. Within Culiacan and other metropolitan areas, El Chapo's sons seem to have much more power and influence than their father. While El Mayo is reported to have lost control of his rural networks in the regions around the capital city, Los Chapitos have not yet been able to gain control of those networks. Allies and enemies. El Mayo, their father's former right-hand man, looks to be Los Chapitos' #1 internal opponent at the time. Furthermore, there have been reports of family feuds with their uncle El Guano over control of drug trafficking and extortion payments he allegedly charged in sections of Sinaloa. Los Chapitos has enlisted pals from across numerous states to aid them in their continuous territory fights. Former competitors such as Pablo Edwin Huerta Nuno, alias El Flaquito, previously of the Arellano Felix cartel in Baja California, as well as long-standing colleagues like Nestor Ernesto Perez Salas, alias El Nini, in Culiacan, are on this list. According to some commentators, the CJNG has profited from the continuing war between Los Chapitos and El Mayo, which has increased their authority and control over regions of Mexico. However, the CJNG remains a primary foe of Los Chapitos as they compete with the Sinaloa Cartel for ultimate control of Mexico's massive illicit economy. CJNG chief Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho, has created an assassination squad to track down and assassinate El Chapo's sons. Prospects. In terms of lifespan, Los Chapitos have a significant advantage over El Mayo. The elderly Chapo is said to be in poor health and to be suffering from diabetes. El Mayo, on the other hand, has extensive ties to the Sinaloa Cartel. Moreover, Los Chapitos' inability to seize complete control of the group's activities so far implies that El Mayo still has plenty of fight left in him. However, if and when El Mayo is ultimately apprehended or shot down in a typically organized crime manner, one or more of Los Chapitos may be prepared to take over the Sinaloa Cartel's top place ahead of anybody else. Well, that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching.